The Hidden Rulers of Earth. Chapter 1. Hubris. On a moonlit night, a lone figure stands atop a skyscraper, gazing at a city aglow with light. In this moment, it's easy to believe the old story of human supremacy, that we sit alone at the apex of life, architects of civilization, conquerors of gravity and time. Our species has scattered electric stars across the night, built machines to roam other worlds, and bent rivers to our will. We imagine ourselves the apex species, singular in our culture and cleverness. From the first sparks of city lights to footprints on the moon, human achievement seems to affirm a triumphant narrative that we are the dominant force of life on Earth, perhaps even destined to transcend it. Our myths and histories are replete with this sense of mastery, portraying humanity as nature's curator and controller. Yet in the quiet stillness beyond the city's glow, a different truth whispers. Beneath the pavement and the pride, life's true sovereigns stir. The soil underfoot teems with ancient communities of microbes. Forests around the city breathe and exchange information in a living network. Insects scurry in the dark on errands as old as the dinosaurs. These unheralded lives do not build monuments or write histories, but they endure and co-create the very world that makes our existence possible. Humankind is revealed as both astonishingly influential and profoundly insignificant in the grand web of life. A groundbreaking scientific assessment recently found that all 8 billion humans together compose a mere 0.01% of Earth's biomass, essentially 1/100% of life's weight on this planet. In contrast, the vast majority of life is composed of organisms we barely notice: plants, fungi, bacteria, insects, and even viruses. Our species is, biologically speaking, a minor filament in Earth's living tapestry. How startling, then, that we have also become a force of outsized impact, a creature so slight in quantity, yet capable of cutting giant swaths through the fabric of life. Since the dawn of civilization, humanity has caused the loss of over 80% of wild mammals and about half of all plants. We have reshaped landscapes, altered the climate, and ushered in what many call the Anthropocene, a new geological epoch marked by human influence. The bones of domestic chickens and the plastics in our sediments may one day testify to this paradox of a tiny species wielding enormous effect. Standing at the peak of our own constructions, it is tempting to see dominance in our reflection. But this dominance is an illusion of scale and time. Our cities and technologies are recent flickers. Our sense of control rests on precarious networks of energy and ecology that we scarcely understand. The truth is that human supremacy is a cultural myth, a story we tell ourselves to reinforce our perceived importance. In reality, our lives and civilization are embedded in a planetary system orchestrated by other powers, the quiet, persistent workings of lesser life forms that far predate us and will likely outlast us. To recognize this is not to diminish humanity's wondrous capacities. Rather, it is to awaken to a more awe-filled, humbling perspective. We are not the sole protagonists of Earth's story. We are part of a chorus of beings, each contributing in ways seen and unseen to the opera of life. What follows is a journey of reframing, an exploration of Earth's hidden rulers. We will meet the true titans of biomass and longevity, the plants that move water and sky, the bacteria that build foundations underfoot, the fungi networking the soil in silent wisdom, the insect civilizations running the world's everyday errands, and the omnipresent viruses editing life's code. In their story, we find a reality more astonishing than our myths of supremacy. We find that dominance in nature is not about what towers above, but what lies beneath and within. It is not about force or fame, but about integration, resilience, and the power to persist through deep time. By the end, perhaps we will see our reflection differently, not as triumphant rulers standing apart, but as kin and beneficiaries, deeply indebted to the lives that truly sustain Earth's living balance. In the hush of a primeval forest at dawn, one can feel the planet's true great powers at work. Mist clings to broad leaves and needles as they draw in carbon dioxide and exhale oxygen, endlessly renewing the atmosphere that every animal, including us, requires. Underfoot, the spongy soil is a living sponge of roots and fungi, alive with microbes cycling nutrients. Here, far from any human settlement, the air is rich and the ground fertile, thanks to life forms that neither know nor need human beings. This scene repeats across billions of acres of earth, in forests, grasslands, and ocean shallows, composing the bulk of the biosphere. Biomass is the weight of life, and by that measure, our human presence is almost vanishingly small. According to comprehensive analyses of global biomass, humans amount to roughly 0.06 billion tons of carbon. That's our share of the element that forms the backbone of organic matter. While that may sound large, it is barely a drop in the biomass ocean. Calculated another way, we humans are just about 0.01% of the total living biomass on Earth. For every gram of humanity, there are 10,000 grams of other life. If life on Earth were a great towering tree, humanity would be but a single leaf upon its canopy. We would need about 70 trillion humans to weigh as much as all life currently on Earth. And yet, our little leaf has convinced itself it's the whole tree. What composes the rest of life's weight is both humbling and illuminating. By far, plants dominate the biosphere, constituting more than 80% of all biomass on Earth. Think of the dense wood of trees, the vast carpets of phytoplankton in the sea, the mass of every blade of grass and kelp frond. Together they utterly dwarf the biomass of animals. The next major share is held by the bacteria, around 13% of global biomass. These tiny organisms, invisible to our eyes, collectively form an invisible living world nearly as massive as all the forests and fields. By comparison, the entire animal kingdom, all mammals, birds, fish, insects, and others, makes up far less than 1% of biomass, much of that being insect mass. Fungi, archaea, protists, and other miscellaneous life forms fill in the remaining few percent. In this accounting, we see that the true heft of life lies in beings we often overlook. A single oak tree in terms of carbon mass outweighs perhaps 100 people. A colony of humble algae can tip scales beyond an entire town. This biomass perspective offers a powerful counterargument to human-centric thinking. It reveals that the planet's primary engineers and occupants are not us, but the green, the small, and the many. We live in a world fundamentally shaped by the quiet majority of life. Every breath we take, every meal we eat, every drop of fresh water we drink is enabled by the immense living processes of those other beings. We are, in a sense, late arriving guests at a feast that was long underway when we appeared. Our total weight is trivial next to the collective tonnage of anchoring roots, of microbial biofilms lining every surface, of insect swarms riding the winds. And yet, intoxicated by our recent successes, we behave as though the feast exists only for us. Consider that our 0.01% sliver of life has appropriated a vastly disproportionate amount of the productivity of ecosystems. By clearing wilderness for cities and farms, by harvesting at industrial scales, humanity has monopolized resources far beyond our biomass share. Today, about 96% of the mass of mammals on Earth is made up of humans and our livestock. Only 4% are wild mammals anymore. We have literally replaced the great wild herds with cattle and ourselves. This replacement underscores the illusion we appear dominant only because we have converted so much of nature into forms that serve us, crops, herds, and infrastructure. But this conversion is a double-edged sword. In taking over habitats and eliminating other life, we are sawing off the very branches that support our weight. Our power is a borrowed power, drawn from the vitality of the broader living world that we diminish at our peril. Biomass, in its unassuming way, is a form of power. The life forms that collectively outweigh us also outperform us in planetary influence. A forest does not boast, yet by its sheer living bulk it can pump moisture into the sky and summon rain. A sprawling reef or grassland quietly supports thousands of other species, maintaining fertility that echoes through food webs. By contrast, our skyscrapers and factories, impressive though they are, rely on the thin veneer of ecosystem services provided by that widespread green and microbial base. The real power brokers of Earth are often invisible or silent, working persistently over eons. Biomass also correlates with endurance. Those groups of organisms that have maintained a high biomass, like plants and bacteria, are the ones that have weathered multiple mass extinctions and planetary changes. They abide, whereas many a flashy apex creature of prehistory, be it dinosaur or saber-toothed cat, rose and fell. Humans have a saying, might makes right. In ecological terms, might lies with the most integrated and necessary, not the loudest or most self-congratulatory. The mightiest lives are those that hold the whole system together, the great combiners of energy, the base of the pyramid, the recyclers and primary producers. These lives have secured a near-permanent role on Earth's stage. In comparison, we Homo sapiens have only just arrived and set up a dazzling pyrotechnic display, drawing all eyes for a brief moment. But when the smoke clears, the ancient giants of biomass, the green, the small, the many, remain, patiently continuing the symphony of life. Understanding this lays the groundwork for a more humble stance, to see ourselves not as puppet masters of a planet, but as one fragile thread in a much vaster and stronger tapestry. Before exploring each of these hidden rulers in turn, it is worth reflecting on a paradox. If humans are so physically insignificant in the sum of life, how have we managed to tilt the world so drastically? Part of the answer is that we leveraged concentrated energy, like fossil fuels, to amplify our influence far beyond our natural metabolic power. But another part is that we have unwittingly enlisted some of those very dominant life forms to our cause, reorienting them to serve our ends. For example, converting millions of acres of plant biomass into monoculture crops, or harnessing microbial fermentation for food and fuel, or domesticating animal muscle power. In doing so, we created a temporary illusion that humanity alone is running the show. The truth is, we have been redirecting larger currents of the biosphere rather than creating those currents from scratch. However, this redirection can only go so far. If we undermine the base, deplete the soils of microbes, denude the land of plants, crash insect populations, the currents falter and our control slips. We are learning, perhaps too late, that the quiet majority ultimately holds the leash. The recent years have offered sobering reminders. A virus, one of the simplest of life's forms, brought human society to its knees in a global pandemic. Insect pollinator declines threaten global food security. Deforestation in one part of the world alters rainfall thousands of kilometers away, triggering droughts or floods. In each case, the smaller, lesser life forms demonstrate that they set the terms of our existence. We ignore them to our own loss. As we now turn to the major players among Earth's hidden rulers, let us adopt the perspective of ecological time and planetary scale. We will meet beings whose importance is measured not in internet trending topics or GDP, but in parts per million of atmospheric gases and gigatons of carbon, in hundreds of millions of years of survival, in networks that span continents beneath our feet. These are the architects, the maintainers, the original and enduring monarchs of the biosphere. Next, we turn to the green sentinels that stand all around us, the plants, passive yet powerful designers of Earth's atmosphere and climate. Chapter 2. Plants. In a sunlit grove, the morning light filters through an ocean of leaves. There is almost a cathedral hush among the trees. No engines roar here, no wheels turn, yet profound work is being done. Plants, in their stillness, are toiling to build and maintain the living world. Through every green leaf, a silent alchemy is occurring. Carbon dioxide is being pulled from the air, combined with water and the power of sunlight, and transformed into sugars and oxygen. This process, photosynthesis, is deceptively gentle in appearance, but utterly revolutionary in effect. It was plants and their photosynthetic precursors that created the breathable atmosphere of our planet and that continue to regulate our climate and chemistry on a global scale. In the grand story of Earth, plants emerge as the architects of Earth's systems, the quiet terraformers who sculpted a barren, toxic world into a habitable paradise long before humans ever arrived. To appreciate plants' role, we must journey back billions of years. The early Earth's atmosphere was essentially devoid of oxygen. It was a hostile place for any creature that breathed as we do. Then, around 2-4 billion years ago, tiny oxygen-producing microbes, the ancestors of modern cyanobacteria, began the Great Oxygenation event. Using sunlight, these microbes flooded the oceans and air with oxygen, a waste product to them, but a future treasure for complex life. Over immense spans of time, atmospheric oxygen rose from near zero to roughly 21% of the air today, all of it thanks to photosynthesis. Every oak and blade of grass, every algal bloom in the sea descends from this legacy. In fact, even the green chloroplasts inside plant cells are the evolutionary great-grandchildren of those ancient cyanobacteria. All the breathable air we enjoy exists because of plant life and its microbial cousins. In this sense, plants engineered the most fundamental aspect of our planet's habitability, its air. As oxygen accumulated and carbon dioxide was drawn down, Earth's climate and geology were transformed. The presence of oxygen led to the formation of the ozone layer, shielding the surface from deadly UV radiation and allowing life to safely colonize land. It also opened the door for aerobic respiration, a far more efficient way to harvest energy than the anoxic metabolisms prior, paving the way for the evolution of complex multicellular organisms, including animals. Plants thus enabled animal life by preparing the stage, first oxygenating the air, then later providing food and habitat on land. It is a deep irony that the supposed apex creatures, animals, including humans, were only able to evolve long after plants and photosynthetic microbes made Earth suitable for them. We literally inhale with every breath the gift of the green world. Fast forward to more recent times, geologically speaking, and we see plants continuing to shape Earth on a grand scale. Take the great Carboniferous forests. Roughly 300 million years ago, vast swamps of fern and tree-like club mosses that proliferated across Pangaea. These plants absorbed tremendous amounts of carbon dioxide from the sky and, in their waterlogged graves, eventually became the coal seams we mine today. Back then, their activity drove atmospheric carbon dioxide to plunge and oxygen to soar. Some estimates suggest oxygen reached over 30%, allowing insects of enormous size to thrive. Imagine dragonflies with 2-foot wingspans. Climate cooled significantly as carbon became locked in plant detritus and buried. In essence, forests help modulate global temperature, a role they still play. Even now, the world's forests and oceanic phytoplankton act as giant levers on the carbon cycle. Every year, plants worldwide absorb about 1/3 of the carbon dioxide emissions that humans produce from burning fossil fuels, buffering the impacts of climate change. They are, in effect, buying us time with their continued diligent work as carbon sinks. Forests store immense amounts of carbon in wood and soil. When we cut or burn them, that carbon escapes back to the sky. Conversely, when forests regrow, they draw carbon back down. The balance of this cycle will determine climate stability or chaos. We might think of plants as the planet's lungs and thermostat combined, inhaling carbon dioxide, exhaling oxygen, perspiring water vapor, shading ground, breaking winds, pumping moisture upward. Through these steady behaviors, plants exert a slow but unyielding influence on climate patterns. One striking example of plant power is the Amazon rainforest. During the dry season in the Amazon, before the monsoon rains arrive, the forest does something astonishing. It effectively creates its own rainy season. Scientists have discovered that as the dry months drag on, the trees intensify their growth and transpiration, releasing huge quantities of water vapor from their leaves. This moisture rises into the atmosphere and seeds cloud formation. By about October, clouds build and storms erupt earlier than they otherwise would, effectively triggered by the forest itself. In this way, the Amazon actively maintains its own climate feedback loop, an interplay of life and atmosphere. When deforestation occurs, this cycle weakens, rainfall declines, and the dry season lengthens, threatening a tipping point where rainforest may collapse into savanna. It is a humbling example of how plants manage hydrological systems. A vast rainforest can pull water from soil and river, evaporate it skyward, and generate weather patterns that feed back to sustain the ecosystem. Our human attempts at weather modification look primitive by comparison to this evolved system of biotic rainmaking. Plants are also chief architects of the pedosphere, the thin skin of fertile soil on which terrestrial life depends. As roots grow, they pry apart rock, secrete acids, and collaborate with fungi and bacteria to break down minerals, gradually forming soil over time. Decaying plant matter contributes organic content, creating that miraculous mix of mineral and humus that can support abundant life. Without plants, bare rock or hardpan would prevail in many areas. After a volcanic eruption or glacial retreat, plants, often in partnership with fungi as lichens or mycorrhizae, are pioneers that initiate soil creation. They build foundations for the future. The very ground under our feet in farms and gardens is a co-creation of plants and microbes slowly terraforming the Earth's crust. One might say plants practice a form of passive engineering. They do not design in the way humans do, with blueprints or conscious intent. Instead, through simple acts of growing and metabolizing, over millions of years they have composed a planet habitable for a vast array of life. They made the air, sculpted the soil, modulated the ocean's chemistry, and even now help keep climate within a range that allows complex ecosystems, including our societies, to flourish. If that isn't power, what is? And they have done all this quietly, as a background condition of life, rarely acknowledged in our narratives of progress. A city or a dam may impress us with its imposing presence, but a forest modifying the composition of an entire atmosphere over eons represents a far deeper and more enduring power. Crucially, plant power is one of persistence and integration, not conquest. Forests do not eliminate all else, they create habitat. A single oak might host hundreds of species, from birds and insects to fungi and epiphytes, within and around it. A coral reef, built by tiny plant-like polyps with symbiotic algae, forms the basis for an entire marine community. Plants, by feeding herbivores, indirectly feed carnivores too. In the food web pyramid, plants and algae form the broad base without which higher tiers collapse. When we measure dominance by necessity, plants are clearly the dominant life form. Nearly every ecosystem's energy input starts with them. Remove the plants and photosynthesizers, and the engine of life everywhere would grind to a halt. Humanity's dependence on plant systems is immediate and absolute. We rely on crops for sustenance, on forests for oxygen and materials, on plant-derived drugs for medicine, on green cover for water regulation and climate buffering. Yet plants would carry on fine without humans. In fact, likely better without our disruptions. This asymmetry underlines who truly holds the cards in our relationship. We have harnessed a portion of plant productivity for our needs, but we have not created that productivity. We simply skim off what the sun, soil, and leaf generate. In our daily lives, plants recede into the background. Trees lining a street, corn swaying in fields, weeds in a vacant lot, while we focus on our machines and screens. But one might imagine a different perspective. Picture Earth from afar, observing the flux of gases and the cycling of matter. You would see jungles inhaling carbon dioxide, greening and browning with the seasons, plankton blooms spreading in the oceans, and huge rivers of moisture flowing from continents to atmosphere. Humanity's concrete and steel barely register at that scale. Our most noticeable signature, perhaps, is the spike in carbon dioxide and the dimming of green cover from deforestation. In effect, our most significant acts have been to meddle in what the plants were already doing. We are currently counter-terraforming, burning the long-buried carbon of ancient plants, coal, oil, gas, and clearing forests, thereby inverting some of the work photosynthesis spent eons to accomplish. It's a reckless experiment in unengineering our atmosphere. What if instead we chose to become allies to the true architects? Ecological humility begins with recognizing the primacy of plants. Imagine treating rainforests and grasslands not as resources to exploit, but as the planet-scaled infrastructure they are, our life support systems. Restoration of forests, protection of wetlands, even urban greening can be seen as paying homage and practical respect to the power of photosynthesis. On a small scale, a pocket of green can cool a neighborhood and host pollinators. On a grand scale, a revived forest can stabilize climate and nurture countless lives. Plants teach us a different model of dominance, one based on patience, collaboration, and feedback loops, rather than aggression or speed. They dominate by being absolutely essential and enduring. Consider the bristlecone pines of North America, living over 4,000 years, quietly recording climate in their rings, surviving through entire civilizations' rises and falls. Or think of seeds, tiny and unassuming, that can lie dormant for decades or centuries until conditions are right, then burst forth to green a barren place. There is profound resilience in these strategies. Plants do not control by force, they control by making life possible and by outlasting other actors. In our rush to declare ourselves kings, we forgot the kingdom of sunlight that truly rules. The lesson of plants is that shaping a world is less about exerting will and more about fulfilling a role in the grand cycling of elements. Perhaps this is why many cultures traditionally revered trees and crops with gratitude. They intuited that these green beings stand between us and death. In mythic terms, one could call plants benevolent rulers. They ask for little, sunlight, water, and soil, yet give immeasurably, food, oxygen, and climate stability. Their reign is hardly noticed, yet supremely effective. As we leave the forest cathedral, let us carry that reverent stillness with us. The next time you take a breath, Remember that you owe it to countless leaves and fronds at work at this very moment. The next time you see a green shoot crack the sidewalk, recall that such quiet force can split rocks and remake landscapes over time. We turn now to the foundations beneath that sidewalk crack, to the unseen foundations of all ecosystems, the bacteria, pioneers of life and tireless workers in life's engine room. Chapter 3: Bacteria. If we scoop a teaspoon of rich soil and hold it to the light, what lies within? To the naked eye, only dark crumble and maybe an ant or two. But peer closer. Imagine shrinking down a millionfold, and an entire cosmos reveals itself. In that single teaspoon of soil live on the order of 1 billion bacteria. Each bacterium is a single cell, often no more than a few micrometers across, yet within its tiny membrane it carries the biochemical toolkit for life's most essential processes. There are more microbes in that teaspoon than there are people in Africa, and that is just one teaspoon from one patch of earth. Bacteria and their microscopic cousins populate every environment on the planet, from deep ocean vents scalding at 122 degrees Celsius to Antarctic ice brine at -20 degrees Celsius, from acidic hot springs to the irradiated walls of nuclear reactors. They live in the air, in the water, in the soil, and in the bodies of all larger creatures. They are, in a very literal sense, everywhere. While plants dominate by biomass, bacteria may dominate by sheer ubiquity and biochemical prowess. They are the foundation of all ecosystems, catalyzing reactions that higher organisms cannot. In the oceans, for example, bacteria form the base of the food chain alongside algae. Marine bacteria consume dissolved organic material and are in turn prey for tiny protozoa, which feed larger plankton up to fish and whales. Without bacteria cleaning up and recycling nutrients, the oceans would quickly clog with debris, and life would starve for usable resources. In soils, bacteria, along with fungi, break down dead matter, returning carbon to the air and minerals to the earth for plants to reuse. This decomposition and nutrient cycling is a service of incalculable value. Imagine if nothing rotted, if every fallen leaf or corpse simply accumulated forever. Life's materials would be locked away and the cycle would halt. Bacteria ensure that death begets new life by recycling the building blocks of biology. Consider also the nitrogen cycle, a crucial process for all organisms. Nitrogen is needed for DNA, proteins, all the machinery of cells. But atmospheric nitrogen is inert, a gas our bodies cannot use directly. Enter the bacteria. Certain soil and root-dwelling bacteria, like the famous rhizobium in legume root nodules or free-living cyanobacteria, can fix atmospheric nitrogen, breaking the nitrogen triple bond and converting it into ammonia and related compounds that plants can absorb. This ability, known as nitrogen fixation, is incredibly complex. Chemically, industrially, it requires high pressure and temperature, the Haber-Bosch process, to synthesize fertilizers. But bacteria have been quietly doing it at ambient conditions for over 2 billion years. Without nitrogen-fixing bacteria, ecosystems and agriculture would collapse for lack of usable nitrogen. Every protein in your body contains nitrogen atoms that were likely fixed by a microbe at some point, perhaps in a clover field or a cyanobacterial bloom. We are debtors to these invisible alchemists for each strand of our muscle and each enzyme in our blood. Bacteria also underpin the ecosystem of our own bodies. The human gut, skin, mouth, and other surfaces host a vast community of microbes, our microbiome. In an average healthy person, the number of bacterial cells in and on the body is of the same order as the number of human cells. In other words, by cell count, you are roughly half bacteria. By genes, you are even more outnumbered. The collective genomes of your microbiome encode hundreds of times more unique genes than your human DNA does. These microbes help digest our food, educate and calibrate our immune systems, produce certain vitamins, and even influence mood and metabolism. We are not discrete individuals so much as walking ecosystems. Holobionts composed of human tissue and microbial symbionts intimately intertwined. Bacteria within us protect against pathogenic invaders by occupying niches and producing substances that deter harmful microbes. They break down fibers we cannot digest, yielding nutrients and signaling molecules. The odor of soil after rain, the tang of yogurt, the very prospect of fermenting grapes into wine or bread rising with yeast, all are gifts of microbial metabolism. One could argue that bacteria long ago domesticated us, rather than the other way around. From their perspective, a large animal like a human is a mobile habitat, a nutrient-rich environment to occupy and propagate within. The same is true for all higher animals and plants. Bacteria live inside the roots of trees, in the gut of termites, on the leaves of every plant, forming partnerships, like the nitrogen fixers or the gut cellulose degrading bacteria in cows that allow them to eat grass. Life's apparent kingdoms are deeply interwoven with these microbial partners. There is ancient precedent for this. The energy-producing organelles in our cells, mitochondria, were once free-living bacteria that took up residence in a progenitor of modern eukaryotic cells more than 1 billion years ago. Similarly, chloroplasts in plant cells began as independent cyanobacteria that moved inside another cell. Thus, major evolutionary leaps, the rise of complex cells, the ability of plants to photosynthesize, came about through bacteria literally becoming part of higher life. Our own cells carry their legacy in every breath we take, like mitochondria enabling us to use oxygen. Bacteria are not just along for the ride, they built the vehicle. Bacteria hold several longevity and endurance records in the history of life. They are among the oldest fossils, with evidence of bacterial life stretching back at least 3.5 billion years. They weathered global catastrophes like the Great Oxygenation, which was lethal to many anaerobic species at the time, as well as mass extinctions, ice ages, meteor impacts. In Earth's toughest moments, when sunlight was choked off by volcanic winters or when the planet froze over, microbial life persisted in deep-sea vents or beneath ice, patiently continuing until conditions improved. Some bacteria can form hardy spores that remain dormant for extremely long periods. Viable bacterial spores have been recovered from ancient salt crystals in amber tens of thousands of years old, and perhaps even older. These dormant forms can spring back to life, given warmth and moisture. It is not inconceivable that bacterial spores could survive interplanetary journeys inside rocks blasted off by impacts, a concept known as lithopanspermia. Indeed, the resilience of bacteria has led to speculation that life could spread from planet to planet. Recent experiments give tantalizing support. In 2015, a Japanese research team placed colonies of the ultra-hardy bacterium Deinococcus radiodurans on the exterior of the International Space Station, directly exposed to the vacuum of space and intense solar radiation. After 3 years in space, enough bacteria survived to be revived in the lab, protected by the sacrificial layers of dead cells around them. From the data, scientists estimated that clumps of such bacteria could potentially endure the transit between Mars and Earth, a journey taking months or years if shielded from full radiation for part of the trip. Other microbes and microscopic life have shown similar mettle. Bacillus spores have survived years in orbit with partial shielding, and tiny animal-like tardigrades famously survived 10 days of open space exposure, enduring vacuum and cosmic rays. These findings support the idea that microbial life might travel inadvertently on meteors or spacecraft, enduring the extremes by entering a hibernation-like state. It's a humbling thought, While we celebrate our engineered rockets piercing the heavens, microscopic organisms, life's firstborn, might naturally hitch rides on rocks and spread life seeds across worlds. In that sense, bacteria, or their spores, could be the true interstellar travelers, carrying bits of Earth's biosphere to lifeless planets or ferrying the spark of life to ours in the distant past. On Earth, bacterial endurance is legendary. There are bacteria in thermal vents that thrive at temperatures above the boiling point of water, metabolizing sulfur or iron in complete darkness. Others inhabit the stratosphere, tolerating high UV exposure. Some, like Deinococcus, can survive radiation levels thousands of times higher than what would kill a human, thanks to remarkable DNA repair mechanisms. In Chernobyl's ruined reactor chambers, scientists even discovered fungi and bacteria that use melanin to harness radiation as an energy source, in effect, eating radiation. When we speak of dominance and supremacy, these extremophiles stake a strong claim. They can live where nothing else can. If some cataclysm sterilized Earth's surface, say a massive asteroid impact or nuclear war, it is more than likely that bacteria and archaea tucked beneath the ocean floor or deep inside Earth's crust, where many have been found, would survive and eventually re-emerge to start the evolutionary clock anew. They are the default state of life, the baseline that persists when more delicate forms perish. The human relationship with bacteria is thus profoundly asymmetrical. We fear pathogenic bacteria for the diseases they cause, and indeed, plague, tuberculosis, cholera have altered the course of history. But these constitute a tiny fraction of bacterial species. Meanwhile, we literally cannot live without beneficial bacteria, from those in our guts to those in the soil and seas producing our food and oxygen. In recent years, as we become more aware of antibiotic resistance and the pitfalls of sterilizing our environments, a paradigm shift is occurring, recognizing that thriving requires partnership with the microbial world, not endless war against it. After all, bacteria have seen countless enemies come and go. Any war we wage on them with drugs or disinfectants only spurs their rapid evolution and genetic exchange via plasmids, viruses, etc. to overcome our assaults. They can swap genes for resistance like trading cards, a phenomenon that reminds us how fluid bacterial societies are. Different species of bacteria routinely share helpful genes with each other, called horizontal gene transfer, a bit like sharing tools in a community workshop. It's a level of cooperative adaptability that multicellular life cannot easily match. Bacteria also blur the lines of individuality and species in fascinating ways. In certain conditions, they form biofilms, slimy mats on surfaces where billions of cells embed in a self-produced matrix, communicating via chemical signals. In a biofilm, bacteria can differentiate roles. Some on the outside might protect the community. Others on the inside specialize in growth, effectively acting like a multicellular organism. Dental plaque on our teeth is one such biofilm, remarkably so dense that a single gram can contain 100 billion bacteria, roughly equal to the number of humans who have ever lived on Earth, compressed into the plaque on one tooth. Within these microcities, bacteria exhibit resilience far beyond what solitary cells manage. They become more resistant to antibiotics and stress. It is as if we see, in the bacterial world, the roots of higher complexity via cooperation and communication, played out on a microscopic stage. Evolutionarily, we owe them everything. The very eukaryotic cell, the complex cell type that makes up fungi, plants, animals, including us, is a coalition that arose when ancient archaea, primitive microbes, merged with bacteria that became mitochondria. Our cell's metabolism is bacterial. Our genome still contains hundreds of genes of bacterial origin. Our development even quietly reenacts this old partnership. For instance, an expecting mother's placenta, has elements resembling an ancestral viral infection turned into a developmental program, which we'll touch on later. It's fair to say that we are in part made of bacteria. They constructed the template for multicellular bodies by pioneering division of labor, communication, and even programmed cell death. Some bacteria sacrifice themselves in a colony for the greater good, a prefiguring of altruism. When we speak of the hidden rulers of Earth, bacteria certainly qualify. They are hidden in plain sight, within and around us, shaping our health, shaping global biogeochemical cycles, and possibly connecting Earth to the cosmos. Their rule is not glamorous. It is microbial toil, fermenting, fixing nitrogen, decomposing, synthesizing nutrients, forming symbioses. If plants are the grand architects, bacteria are the tireless builders and maintenance crew, keeping the biosphere's house in order. They were here at the very beginning, and they likely will witness the final sunset, long after humans are gone. Through them, one can see that dominance is not about size or strength, but about adaptability, ubiquity, and indispensability. In light of bacteria's saga, human supremacy indeed appears a fragile myth. We fancy ourselves top of the food chain, but strip away our technology and in a matter of days, our lives depend on the mercy of microbial processes. Water purification, food spoilage, disease control. Even with our technology, a simple gut dysbiosis or uncontrolled infection can bring the mightiest human low. A reminder that we are ecosystems, not isolated beings. Our cities and industries have not replaced the bacterial matrix, they float within it. Sewage treatment, agriculture, environmental remediation. Whenever we face a complex task, more often than not, we enlist bacteria as unseen helpers, from engineered E. coli producing insulin to oil-eating microbes cleaning spills. In acknowledging bacteria's rule, there is an opportunity for wisdom. We can shift from trying to dominate or sterilize the microbial world to learning from it and working with it. For instance, regenerative farming leverages soil microbes to restore fertility naturally rather than dousing fields in synthetic fertilizer, which itself is based on mimicking bacterial nitrogen fixation, an ironic loop. Probiotics and microbiome transplants seek to cure illness by restoring microbial balance instead of just killing pathogens. Even in technology, we emulate bacterial traits, distributed networks, rapid iteration, horizontal knowledge transfer. These are hallmarks of successful human organizations inspired by microbial resilience. Before moving on, let's pause at a provocative edge of speculation. Could bacteria even be the mechanism through which life spreads in the universe? Some scientists have mused that Earth life might have originated from Mars via meteorites. As Mars had liquid water earlier than Earth, and impacts could have ejected Martian rocks bearing microbes that eventually landed here. If true, our genesis would be bacterial panspermia, and we would all essentially be Martians by ancestry. This remains unproven, but studies of meteorites have shown some can travel between planets in conditions that at least spores or hardy cells might survive. And when we send spacecraft to other worlds, we are painstakingly careful to sterilize them, precisely because we know how tough microbes are. We do not want to unintentionally colonize another planet with Earth bacteria and confound our search for native life. This precaution, mandated by planetary protection guidelines, is in itself a nod to microbial supremacy. NASA worries less about humans hitchhiking to Mars than about microbes doing so, because historically microbes have proven far better at colonizing new environments than we have. Bacteria, humble and ancient, cast a long shadow over life's story. In their light, we see that life's rulers need not be visible, charismatic, or large. They need only be vital. The foundation of a house is seldom seen, but without it the house falls. So it is with bacteria and the living world. With that in mind, We turn now to another largely hidden yet profoundly influential kingdom, the fungi, nature's great recyclers and network weavers, which often work hand in hand with bacteria and plants to sustain ecosystems. Chapter 4: Fungi. In the dim understory of a forest, you might notice a mushroom pushing through the leaf litter, its cap a sudden dash of color or pale white dome among the browns and greens. That mushroom is just the fleeting fruit of a much larger creature hidden beneath your feet, the mycelium, a vast network of fine filaments spreading through the soil and decaying wood. Fungi are often invisible to us, existing as delicate threads called hyphae that permeate substrates, digesting and absorbing. But despite their low profile, fungi are indispensable players in Earth's ecosystems. If plants are the architects and bacteria the fundamental builders, fungi are the master recyclers and underground connectors, acting like the planet's waste processing facility and communication web all at once. The most famous role of fungi is as decomposers. Along with bacteria, fungi break down organic matter, fallen trees, dead leaves, carcasses, dung, all the detritus of life. However, fungi have a special talent that bacteria alone often cannot match. They can digest tough polymers like lignin and cellulose, the components that make wood hard and plant fibers stiff. When a giant tree dies and collapses in the forest, it is primarily fungi that invade the log, secreting powerful enzymes that rot the wood, releasing carbon back to the atmosphere and freeing up minerals for new plants to take. Without fungi, forests would pile high with undecomposed woody debris. Carbon would lock up in litter, and nutrient cycles would grind to a halt. The thick coal beds of the Carboniferous period actually formed in part because fungi had not yet evolved efficient ways to break down lignin at that time, so dead trees accumulated faster than they decayed, eventually compressing into coal. It was only later that certain fungi, such as white rot fungi, developed enzymes to decompose lignin, helping end that coal-forming era. Thus, fungal evolution helped regulate Earth's long-term carbon storage. Today, fungi continue this quiet work everywhere plants grow. They ensure that death nourishes new life by dismantling the old. But fungi are not only cleanup crews, they are also connectors. Many people have heard of the Wood Wide Web, a poetic term for the mycorrhizal networks that link trees and plants underground. Here is how it works. The majority of land plants form symbiotic partnerships with fungi in their root systems. The plant feeds the fungus sugars from photosynthesis. In return, the fungal hyphae extend far into the soil, acting as extra fine roots to gather water and nutrients, especially phosphorus and nitrogen, and bring them back to the plant. A single fungus can connect with multiple plants at once, and likewise a single plant can host multiple fungal partners. The result is a vast interconnected lattice beneath the forest floor. Through this lattice, resources can be transferred from one plant to another. For example, a tall tree with excess sugar might pass some to a nearby shaded seedling struggling to photosynthesize via the fungal network. Experiments have shown carbon moving between different species of trees linked by mycorrhizae, often flowing from the more established to the younger, or from deciduous trees to evergreens and vice versa as seasons change. Additionally, signals, such as chemical warnings of pest attack, may also travel through fungal conduits, priming neighboring plants to bolster their defenses. In these ways, fungi facilitate communication and cooperation in plant communities, blurring the lines of individuality, much like bacteria do in their world. Suzanne Simard, a pioneering forest ecologist, describes older large trees as mother trees that use fungal connections to support seedlings. In a deeply shaded forest, only a few sunlit giants may be making surplus food. Through the mycorrhizal network, they can share some of that carbon with understory juveniles, helping keep them alive until a gap in the canopy gives them a chance to grow. This challenges the old notion of trees solely competing with each other. It appears there is also a level of mutual aid mediated by fungi. Some scientists speak of these fungal networks as akin to neural networks in a brain, or, like the Internet of the forest, decentralized yet capable of transmitting resources and information. It's an emergent system where the forest behaves less like a collection of isolated plants and more like a unified organism spread across many roots and fungal strands. From an evolutionary view, why would fungi do this? Well, it benefits the fungus to keep its host plants healthy and robust. More sugar reward for the fungus. Also, by connecting multiple plants, the fungi ensure that if one plant dies, they can still obtain nutrients from others. It's a form of hedging bets and maximizing resource flow in the network. On the plant side, those with good fungal partners gain a huge edge in nutrient uptake and stress resistance. This relationship is ancient. Mycorrhizal fungi have been found in some of the earliest plant fossils. In fact, fungi likely helped the first plants colonize land roughly 450 million years ago by aiding them in nutrient absorption in harsh, soil-poor conditions. It's even proposed that plants outsourced some of their root functions to fungi from the very beginning, shaping their evolution together. Neither plants nor terrestrial ecosystems would be the same without fungi working behind the scenes. Beyond mycorrhizae, consider the scale and persistence of fungal life. The largest organism on Earth, by area, is not a whale or a redwood. It is a fungus. In the Blue Mountains of Oregon lives an individual Armillaria ostoii, a honey fungus, that spans roughly 3.5 square miles of forest floor. That's about 9 kilometers squared of a single clone of fungus, all genetically one being. This colossal mycelium is estimated to be at least 2,400 years old, and possibly much older, up to 8,000 years by some estimates. It quietly infiltrates the soil and roots, occasionally sending up patches of honey mushrooms as fruiting bodies. This one fungus likely weighs on the order of hundreds of tons. Imagine an organism as expansive as a small town and older than most human civilizations, living beneath the forest, largely unseen. It has endured fires, climate shifts, diseases. Long after individual trees come and go, the fungus persists. A similarly massive Armillaria in Michigan was found to weigh over 400 tons and to be centuries old. There are likely many other giant fungi hidden out there. This illustrates fungal endurance. They can achieve great size and age by growing slowly and persistently, insinuating themselves through substrates without drawing much attention. Such fungi can be pathogenic. Armillaria slowly kills some trees even as it lives on them, but even in death there is renewal. The fungus then decomposes the tree it killed, making room for new growth. Many fungi are far more benevolent. Some protect plants from drought or heat by improving water uptake or producing protective chemicals. Some form lichens with algae to pioneer bare rock, creating the first soils. After a forest fire, certain fire-following fungi are first on the scene, fruiting en masse on charred ground, beginning the reset of nutrient cycling. Then come successional plants, often aided by fungal partners. In every stage of ecosystem recovery and function, fungi have a role. Fungi also directly support animal life, including us. They are nature's pharmacists and chefs. Penicillin, the first antibiotic, was derived from a penicillium mold, a fungal gift that has saved countless human lives. Many other medicines come from fungal metabolites, including cyclosporine, an immune suppressant vital for organ transplants, which comes from the fungus Tolypocladium. For cholesterol control, statins are used, originally isolated from Aspergillus molds. Yeasts, which are single-celled fungi, give us bread, beer, and wine through fermentation. These are processes treasured by civilizations for millennia. Edible mushrooms have nourished humans since prehistory. Some are prized as delicacies, like truffles and morels, while others remain dietary staples. In forest ecosystems, animals often depend on fungi in seasonal cycles. Wild boar and rodents, for example, sniff out truffles buried underground. As they feed, they disperse fungal spores, a mutualism that benefits both parties. There is an entire ecology of fungivores, fungus-eating creatures, whose lives are interwoven with the rhythms of fungal growth and reproduction. Perhaps most intriguingly, fungi challenge our categories of intelligence and agency. They lack a brain or nervous system, yet their mycelial networks can solve complex problems, like finding the shortest path to a food source in a maze. Experiments have shown slime molds and fungal networks doing this, effectively optimizing routes, much like our internet packet routing. When nutrients are uneven, the mycelium redistributes resources along its threads to growth fronts that need it, an emergent coordination. One could metaphorically call this fungal wisdom, not conscious, but a kind of adaptive network intelligence honed by evolution. Some mycologists, like Paul Stamets, have speculated boldly about fungal sentience, or at least likened the mycelium to an organic computer, processing signals across its extent. Whether or not we use such lofty terms, it is clear that fungi operate in a networked, responsive manner that is quite alien to our centralized ways of thinking, yet remarkably effective. It may be no coincidence that computer scientists have drawn inspiration from fungal networks for designing resilient communication algorithms. Fungi also exhibit phenotypic flexibility that seems almost inventive. For instance, the parasite Ophiocordyceps unilateralis infects ants and then astonishingly manipulates the ant's behavior. The so-called zombie ant fungus makes it climb and clamp in a location ideal for the fungus to fruit and spread its spores. It's a mind control strategy evolved by a simple fungus to exploit an insect's neural circuitry. If one were to measure dominance by ability to influence others, this fungus dictates the actions of a complex animal, a macabre form of puppet mastery in nature's theater. It reminds us that power in ecosystems can be subtle or insidious. A small organism can utterly control a larger one by biochemical means. Thankfully, most fungi choose cooperation over such parasitism, but these examples show the range of fungal interactions from mutualistic to manipulative. As with bacteria, fungi's footprint on Earth is measureless. They've helped form soil, shape climate, forest fungi influence carbon storage, cloud formation via spore release, and more, and guide plant and animal evolution. Unlike bacteria, they may have a role to play beyond Earth. NASA scientists have begun exploring fungi as a tool for space exploration. For example, mycologists and engineers are developing myco-architecture, the concept of growing structures on the Moon or Mars using fungal mycelium as a biological scaffold. The idea is to take dormant fungal spores or cultures to a base, inoculate some prepared substrate, and let the fungus weave a lightweight but strong structure, which can then be dried or reinforced to serve as a building material. Such self-growing habitats might reduce the need to carry heavy construction materials across space. Fungi's adaptability to extreme conditions is a boon here. Certain fungi can survive high radiation. Some even thrive on it and extreme cold by forming spores. Indeed, tests on the International Space Station have shown spores of Antarctic fungi surviving 18 months in Mars-like conditions outside the station, enduring intense UV and low pressure. The melanin pigment in some fungi grants them extraordinary radiation resistance, an ability being studied for its potential to shield astronauts or equipment. So as humans reach for the stars, we may bring fungi not just incidentally as contamination to avoid, but deliberately as allies in survival, using them to recycle air and waste, produce food, and build structures. In science fiction terms, one could imagine terraforming a lifeless planet, beginning with hardy fungal forms, breaking down rock, and beginning soil formation, much as they likely did on early Earth. Fungi underscore a critical aspect of dominance, resilience through symbiosis and integration. They rarely act alone. Their strength is in partnerships, with plants, with algae. Lichens are a symbiosis of fungus and algae, or cyanobacteria, enabling them to colonize bare rock and harsh environments. And with animals, leafcutter ants farm fungus on gathered vegetation to feed their colony. Neither ant nor fungus could flourish without the other. Fungus plant-animal interactions create wholes that are greater than the sum of their parts. In these networks of mutual benefit, fungi ensure their own survival and proliferation. Dominance here is not about overtopping others, but weaving oneself so tightly into the living fabric that one becomes indispensable. A forest without fungi is unthinkable. It would stall and collapse under its own litter. A world without fungi would quickly choke on debris and lose fertility. Life as we know it would cease. For humans, fungi have always been a bit magical and mysterious, appearing overnight as mushrooms, some delicious, some deadly, some hallucinogenic or medicinal. In many cultures, mushrooms were thought to have spiritual significance, or fungi in general were linked to transformation and rebirth due to their role in decay and regeneration. The largest organism being a fungus and the oldest continuous life forms, including giant fungal clones, fit these ancient intuitions. That there is a deep wisdom and continuity in the fungal kingdom that humbles our brief presence. As we examine fungi's role, another dimension of the illusion of control emerges. We are often oblivious to the fungal networks underfoot when we manage lands. Clear-cutting a forest, for instance, not only removes trees, it also disrupts the mycorrhizal networks that connected them. When we plant tree monocultures in plantations, the lack of diverse fungal partners or mother tree networks might make those stands less resilient to disease and drought. Restoration ecology now pays more attention to reintroducing native mycorrhizae to degraded lands along with plants, effectively rebooting the ecological internet of the soil. Our agriculture, heavily reliant on chemical inputs, is recognizing that nurturing soil fungi through no-till practices, cover crops, and more can improve yields naturally by fostering soil health. So, a shift is happening from seeing soil as inert growing medium to seeing it as a living fungal bacterial matrix that we should collaborate with. We find that working with fungi, whether in creating richer soil or fighting pests with fungal biocontrols or developing fungus-derived materials, like biodegradable packaging grown from mycelium, often outperforms trying to outsmart them or replace them with synthetic solutions. The fungal kingdom, with its recyclers and connectors, teaches us the power of networks and cycles. It suggests that longevity and influence come from being a part of life's circular processes, not standing outside them. There is poetic justice in how fungi handle control. Rather than rule from above, they rule from below, literally and figuratively. They undermine, in the best sense, and support simultaneously, breaking down the mighty fallen tree to nourishing humus while supporting the delicate seedling to rise. Their control is the kind that yields rather than commands, that infiltrates rather than assaults. It's reminiscent of water-carving canyons over ages, soft power that outlasts the hard. Having explored plants, bacteria, and fungi, the triumvirate of quiet earth shapers, we now turn to a more bustling realm that often draws human attention, the world of insects, and particularly the social insects like ants. These are creatures closer to our scale of perception, yet even among them we will find that dominance and success come through collective integration and resilience, not individual might. Ants, in their tiny wisdom, may have more to teach us about sustainable civilization than we realize. Chapter 5: Insects. On a summer day, if you pause by a sunlit patch of ground and look closely, you might see a column of ants trudging purposefully along the earth. Each ant carries a burden, a bit of leaf, a grain of sand, the body of an insect many times its size, all back to the colony. There is no visible commander, no centralized signals we can discern, yet the ants coordinate with remarkable efficiency. They follow pheromone trails, help each other with heavy loads, and respond to obstacles or threats in unison as if guided by a collective mind. This scene, commonplace and humble, is the manifestation of one of Earth's most successful forms of life, insect societies. In particular, the ants, family, Formicidae, along with their cousins the termites and some bees and wasps, have achieved something that in many ways parallels human societies: agriculture, architecture, warfare, and complex division of labor. But they have done so with brains the size of pinheads, an entirely decentralized organization. They are a decentralized civilization that has spread to every continent except Antarctica, adapted to nearly every terrestrial environment, and persisted tens of millions of years through shifts that wiped out more imposing creatures. By numbers and biomass, ants and other insects are formidable. A recent comprehensive study estimated that there are 20 quadrillion ants alive on Earth at any given time. That is 20,000 trillion individuals, or about 2.5 million ants for every human being. The combined mass of all those ants is on the order of 12 megatons of carbon, which is approximately 20% of the biomass of all humans. In other words, ants alone rival us in collective heft. Add in beetles, flies, termites, butterflies, and myriad other insect groups, and insect biomass far exceeds that of humanity. E.O. Wilson, the famed biologist and ant expert, once referred to insects as the little things that run the world. He was speaking of their ecological role. Ants aerate and enrich soil, pollinate plants, as in the case of bees and some wasps, dispose of carrion, control pest populations, disperse seeds, and serve as food for countless other animals. It's hard to find an ecosystem on land that isn't strongly shaped by insect activity. In tropical rainforests, for example, ants are so abundant and voracious that they can be considered the dominant predators and scavengers, not the jaguars or birds. Army ant swarms, moving in carpets of 500,000, can strip a patch of forest floor of other arthropods in hours. Leaf-cutter ants in the American tropics systematically harvest foliage and bring it to underground chambers where they cultivate a fungus. Literal farmers tending fungal gardens, which they then eat. These ant farms compost so much plant material that they significantly influence nutrient cycling in the forest. Termites in savannas build mounds that ventilate and enrich soil. Their constant grazing on dead plant matter recycles nutrients, and their tunnels improve soil structure and water absorption. Ants epitomize decentralized resilience. Each individual ant is relatively simple and short-lived, yet the colony as a superorganism can endure for decades. Queens can live 10+ years in some species, continually laying eggs to replenish workers. Colonies adapt to challenges collectively. If food is scarce, they send more foragers. If a path is blocked, scouts find a new route and others follow. If under attack, soldiers and workers coordinate a defense, sometimes sacrificing themselves to save the brood. No single ant grasps the big picture, yet the colony-level behavior emerges smartly from local interactions. In a famous experiment, researchers showed that an ant colony can solve an optimization problem, like finding the shortest path through a maze from nest to food. They do it by trial and error of many ants, reinforcing the successful path with stronger pheromone trails, a process analogous to finding a solution by consensus. In effect, The colony computes solutions to survival tasks using its members as parallel processing units. If one ant fails or dies, it makes no difference. The colony routes around the failure. This is a kind of robustness through redundancy and connectivity that any human network engineer might envy. Ants also demonstrate innovations we once thought uniquely human. They have rudimentary forms of warfare and slavery. Certain ant species will raid others' colonies, killing defenders and stealing larvae, which they then rear as a slave workforce. They engage in symbiosis. Many tend aphids like cattle, protecting them from predators and moving them to prime feeding spots in exchange for the sugary honeydew the aphids excrete. Some ants even practice hygiene to limit disease. Leafcutter ants produce antimicrobial secretions and have symbiotic bacteria on their bodies that suppress pathogenic fungi in their gardens, essentially employing biological pest control. In harvester ant colonies, undertaker ants carry out dead nestmates to a refuse pile away from the nest to prevent contamination, akin to how we have graveyards. The complexity of these behaviors is encoded not in written laws or central authority, but in instinctual rules and chemical communication refined by natural selection over eons. It works astonishingly well. Ant societies have been around at least 100 million years, as evidenced by ant fossils found in Cretaceous amber alongside dinosaurs. By contrast, our genus Homo is a few million years old at most, and our complex societies mere thousands. Termites, though not closely related to ants, parallel them as well. Termite mounds in Africa and Australia can be huge architectural feats, housing millions of individuals, with intricate tunnel ventilation systems that keep the interior climate stable, using principles that have even inspired sustainable building ventilation designs in human architecture. Termites also cultivate fungus. In the case of macrotermitine termites of Africa, they grow fungus on chewed wood inside the nest to help digest cellulose, similar to leafcutter ant farming. They too have a caste system, queens that can live extraordinarily long, up to 30 years, laying eggs continuously, soldiers with specialized jaws or chemical spray nozzles, workers who care for young and build. A termite colony is effectively a single organism distributed in many bodies, much like an ant colony or a beehive. What gives these tiny creatures such enduring influence? One answer is collective intelligence and the ability to scale. A lone ant is insignificant. A legion of ants is formidable. In 2013, scientists estimated that driver ants in Central Africa, during a single raid, can collectively kill up to 100,000 prey animals per day, from other insects up to small vertebrates, basically clearing the ground as they move. This mass effect shapes ecosystems. Insect swarms also have effects on atmosphere and biogeochemical cycles. Large swarms of insects, like desert locust plagues, can consume vast vegetation, alter plant succession, and even influence atmospheric aerosol loading through their droppings or body fragments in extreme cases. Another aspect is insect fertility and adaptability. Insects breed rapidly, mutate fast, and are incredibly adaptable to niches. This has allowed them to colonize everything from Arctic tundra, springtails and midges in ice, for example, to deserts, where darkling beetles survive on fog condensation. They have been on Earth hundreds of millions of years. Major groups like cockroaches and dragonflies predate the dinosaurs. Cockroaches, often reviled, are actually marvels of resilience. They can eat almost anything, survive without food for weeks, handle high doses of radiation, and quickly evolve resistance to poisons. They and ants often symbolize the idea that if humanity extinguished itself, the insects would likely carry on, and perhaps even hardly notice our absence. When we measure dominance not by conscious control but by functional indispensability, insects shine. Pollination is a service primarily rendered by insects: bees, butterflies, beetles, flies. Without insect pollinators, a huge fraction of flowering plants, including many crops, would fail to reproduce. The current decline of pollinators due to pesticides and habitat loss has rung alarm bells, reminding us how our food security ties back to these tiny laborers. Soil engineering by insects like ants and termites, along with earthworms, which aren't insects but play similar roles, help aerate soil and mix nutrients, boosting plant growth. Insects convert plant biomass, which many vertebrates can't directly digest, into animal biomass. They are fodder for birds, amphibians, small mammals, fish. The collapse of insect populations could cascade into famine for many higher animals, including fish we eat. Already, scientists have observed worrying trends in some places, a so-called insect apocalypse, with steep drops in insect abundance from habitat destruction and pesticides. This is like losing rivets from an airplane wing. You might not notice one or two gone, but eventually the structure fails. We are slowly realizing that, for all our power, we cannot easily replace or mechanize the ecosystem roles that insects perform for free. Artificial pollination by hand or robot, for example, is vastly less efficient and more costly than letting bees do the job. Similarly, controlling agricultural pests is often best achieved by encouraging predatory insects or spiders rather than saturating fields with chemicals that often cause more harm. Insect societies are also instructive in how they weather environmental changes. Through collective buffering and genetic diversity, queens mating with multiple males, colony fissioning and spreading risk, they persist. For instance, when a fire or flood hits an area, ant colonies often rebound swiftly or survive by strategies like forming rafts. Fire ants link together in a living raft to float on floodwaters, carrying the queen and brood. Some ants simply relocate nests if threatened, splitting off and establishing satellites, a decentralized survival strategy. Contrast this with large animals that might have few offspring and need stable conditions. Insects can rebound within a season. From a philosophical angle, ants and other social insects challenge our assumption that high intelligence or individuality is necessary for dominion. They demonstrate the power of many acting as one. No single ant decides to build a 2-meter-tall anthill. Yet by following simple local rules, such as carrying grains of sand and dropping them where density is lower or responding to specific pheromone cues, the colony manages to construct elaborate mounds. These structures include spiral internal ramps and chambers that regulate temperature and humidity. The system organizes itself. Human systems often emerge in a similar way, beyond the design of any one individual. Markets, languages, and cultures all develop through countless interactions, even though we tend to credit their formation to great leaders or singular inventors. With ants, it is obvious there is no CEO ant. Yet the work gets done, and perhaps more effectively than many top-down human projects. In terms of evolutionary endurance, insects have witnessed the rise and fall of the dinosaurs, watched the continents drift, and survived multiple mass extinctions. Even the event that ended the Cretaceous period and wiped out the dinosaurs did not stop many insect lineages from persisting. As a group, they are a safe bet to survive well into the far future, unless a truly catastrophic event sterilizes the planet. If a new calamity occurs, such as a period of rapid warming or cooling, insects possess the numbers and genetic variability to adapt or migrate. Some are already shifting their ranges in response to climate change, with pests expanding into new areas as frost lines retreat. For better or worse, they are the nimble first responders of life, constantly adjusting and filling ecological niches as they become available. For humans, insects have always been a mix of friend and foe. We admire butterflies and diligent honeybees. We swat flies and curse mosquitoes, which still kill hundreds of thousands of people yearly through malaria and other diseases. We keep silkworms for cloth, bees for honey, and cochineal bugs for dye. We also wage wars on locusts and crop-eating beetles. Perhaps our ambivalence stems from seeing something of ourselves in them. They are builders and destroyers, social cooperators and fierce competitors, capable of feats of altruism. Some ant workers will explode themselves to defend the colony, as in the Malaysian exploding ant Colobopsis, which ruptures and releases a glue-like substance on enemies. At the same time, insects are capable of acts that resemble biological war crimes, such as parasitic wasps laying eggs inside live caterpillars to eventually consume them from within. Insects reveal nature's unvarnished pragmatism, where beauty and horror are intertwined. They also quietly enforce humbling checks on our own sense of supremacy. The deadliest animal to humans is not the lion or the shark, but the mosquito. Through the diseases it spreads, this tiny buzzing afterthought has toppled empires and decimated armies with malaria or yellow fever. In the tropics, entire colonial campaigns failed because of insect-borne diseases. Even today, mosquito-driven illnesses continue to shape demographics and limit economic potential across vast regions. The sheer scale of insects means they can never be fully eradicated or controlled. At best, we manage and adapt to them. They are a reminder that we live in their world just as much as they live in ours. A final, poignant consideration. Insects and other small creatures experience the world on different timescales with fast nervous systems, short generations, and tiny sizes. They solve problems in parallel that we tend to solve with planning. It has been said that an alien observer might, with equal reason, identify the dominant life on Earth as the ants or bees rather than humans. These creatures have complex cities, hives and mounds, widespread distribution, and significant environmental impact. Indeed, from an objective ecological standpoint, ants have arguably been as successful as primates in carving out a prominent niche. Their success may not involve spacecraft or writing, but it is visible in other forms: territory colonized, biomass sustained, continuity across the ages. There is much we can learn from insect societies about decentralized resilience and perhaps about humility. Ants don't need to know they rule. They simply do their work, and the forest is tended. There is a quiet, beautiful modesty in that. As we face global challenges, one might wonder whether our survival would be better ensured by emulating certain aspects of these decentralized systems. Empowering local action and building robust networks may prove more durable than relying on singular heroes or brittle centralized structures. Nature often favors the former. Stepping back, we have explored life forms that grow progressively smaller in size, yet arguably wield greater hidden influence: plants, bacteria, fungi, insects. It becomes clear that power in nature often operates from the ground up or from the inside out rather than from the top down. But there is one more level, even smaller and more inconspicuous, that exerts perhaps the strangest and most pervasive influence of all: the viruses. Are viruses alive? The answer is debatable. Yet their impact on the course of evolution and ecosystems is profound. They are the ultimate paradox. On their own, they are inert and barely more than packets of genetic information. But within a host, they become potent and transformative. Viruses have shaped genomes and, by some accounts, even driven major evolutionary transitions. Let us now peer into the shadowy realm of viruses, evolution's editors, and possible couriers between worlds. Chapter 6: Viruses. They are so small that hundreds of millions could dance on the head of a pin. They have no metabolism, no cell structure, no apparent life at all outside a host. And yet, viruses saturate the planet in uncountable numbers and hold considerable sway over life's trajectory. Often dismissed as organisms at the edge of life, Viruses might be better seen as life's genetic puppeteers and wildcards. Abundant, ancient, and endlessly creative in their parasitic strategies, viruses are like the dark matter of the biosphere, invisible in plain sight, yet arguably more numerous than any other biological entities. It's estimated that there are around 10 to the 31st power virus particles on Earth. That number is astronomically large, roughly 10 million times the number of stars in the observable universe. If we lined up all those viruses end to end, they would stretch for 100 million light years. Such statistics boggle the mind, but their implication is clear. In the contest for sheer ubiquity, viruses win hands down. Where do these incalculable hordes lurk? Everywhere life is found, viruses are found, because viruses depend on living hosts to replicate. A drop of seawater can contain millions of viruses. Oceans are in fact a hotbed of viral activity. On the order of 10 to the 23rd viral infections occur in the oceans every second, and these infections destroy an estimated 20 through 40% of all the bacteria in the sea each day. This is startling. Nearly a third of marine microbial life is turned over daily by virus-induced lysis, cell bursting. What this means ecologically is that viruses help drive nutrient cycles in the ocean. By killing bacteria and algae, they release organic matter that then becomes available to other microbes or sinks to the depths as marine snow. They can control algal blooms by knocking down the populations when they get too dense, thus influencing carbon uptake and oxygen production at a global scale. Some viruses even carry photosynthesis genes, certain cyanophages, viruses that infect cyanobacteria, have genes for photosynthetic proteins, which they temporarily lend to their hosts to keep them photosynthesizing longer, so the virus can replicate more using the host's energy. It's a clever genetic hijacking. Viruses literally reprogram host metabolism to maximize their own spread, thereby incidentally tweaking the biochemistry of the ocean. Beyond their ecological impact, viruses are perhaps nature's greatest agents of genetic change. They are constantly shuffling genes between species. Bacteriophages, viruses that infect bacteria, often carry snippets of DNA from one bacterial host to another, facilitating horizontal gene transfer. It is one way antibiotic resistance genes spread so quickly among bacteria. In the broader evolutionary history, viruses have likely been responsible for major leaps by transferring genes across domains of life. Our own genome is riddled with scars of past viral infections. Close to 8% of the human genome is composed of endogenous retroviruses, ancient virus DNA that integrated into sperm or egg cells of our ancestors and was passed down. Most of these remnants are inactive, genomic fossils, but some were co-opted for our own function. For example, a gene called syncytin in mammals, which is critical for the formation of the placenta, was derived from a viral envelope gene. Long ago, a retrovirus infected a distant mammalian ancestor. One of its genes, which causes cells to fuse, allowing the virus to enter cells, was repurposed to fuse cells in the developing placenta, enabling nutrient exchange between mother and fetus. Without that viral contribution, live-bearing mammals as we know them might never have evolved. In a sense, a virus helped mammals conquer reproduction beyond laying eggs, a true evolutionary watershed. This is one striking example. There may be many more subtle ways viruses have steered evolution by donating useful genes or regulatory sequences that became incorporated into host genomes. Viruses also act as selective pressures that sharpen the defenses of organisms. The endless arms race between hosts and viruses has driven the evolution of sophisticated immune systems. The adaptive immune system in vertebrates, for instance, which can remember specific pathogens, likely arose to deal with fast mutating threats like viruses. Even bacteria have their own rudimentary immune system. The CRISPR-Cas system, which evolved to cut up invading phage DNA, a system we have now co-opted as a gene editing tool. Consider how fundamental that is. A bacterial defense against viruses gave humanity CRISPR, which may revolutionize biotechnology and medicine. Again and again, viruses push life to innovate. They can also, at times, become co-opted as symbionts. Some wasps, for example, have incorporated virus-like particles into their biology to help suppress the immune systems of caterpillars they parasitize, ensuring their wasp larvae can develop. Basically using viral tools for their own reproductive success. There are instances of plants and fungi where viral infections confer tolerance to heat or drought that the host alone wouldn't have. In these cases, viruses act almost like endosymbionts, blurring the line between friend and foe. But of course, we mostly know viruses for their role in disease. Recent history provided a harsh lesson in viral power: the COVID-19 pandemic. A single-stranded RNA virus, SARS-CoV-2, about 0.1 microns in diameter, an absolute minuscule speck, managed within months to spread globally, stall the engines of the world economy, overwhelm healthcare systems, and profoundly alter daily life for billions. It underscored how fragile human society is against a microscopic adversary. All our nuclear arsenals, technological feats, and economic might were not immediately effective against a novel virus. We had to retreat to ancient measures, quarantines, masks, and social distancing, until scientific ingenuity in the form of vaccines and therapeutics could catch up. Historically, viruses have arguably shaped human destinies as much as any empire. Think of smallpox decimating indigenous populations in the Americas, or the influenza of 1918, which killed more people than World War I. Even the balance of power in wars has been shifted by viral diseases. Napoleon's failure in Haiti, for example, was due in part to yellow fever and other illnesses. These episodes make the point clear. Something so small that it is technically not even alive can bring our vaunted civilization to a standstill. From an evolutionary perspective, viruses might be seen as a mechanism for maintaining balance. They prune populations, preventing any one species from dominating too unchecked. They often hit hardest in dense populations, which in nature could mean curtailing outbreaks of single-species booms. In the ocean, viruses keep bacteria in check, as noted. In animal populations, viruses can be a form of population control. Myxoma virus, intentionally released to curb invasive rabbits in Australia in the 1950s, is a controversial example. It did crash the rabbit population dramatically, showing how a virus can be like a scythe through an overpopulated host species. This is a dangerous approach for us to wield, but it's interesting that nature already employs it organically. Viruses also raise a tantalizing notion about life's reach. Could viruses be the couriers between worlds? Some scientists theorize that viruses, given their ability to withstand being frozen and possibly survive in a dormant state in space, especially if shielded inside rocks or dust, could be dispersed via impacts or cosmic dust to seed life elsewhere, or at least genetic material. Unlike cellular life, viruses are far smaller and might better endure the high-speed ejection and re-entry process, though the intense heat of entry likely obliterates most, except perhaps those buried in meteorites. Panspermia hypotheses often focus on hardy bacteria, but viruses might be even better suited as interstellar gene packets. If life had a cosmic distribution system, viruses could be it. Some intriguing discoveries, like detection of complex organic molecules in space and potential structures reminiscent of viruses in meteorites, though these claims are not widely accepted, keep the debate going. It remains speculative, but not beyond the realm of possibility that viruses, or virus-like plasmids, could transfer useful genes across planetary systems given the vast timescales and opportunities. Even if life is unique to Earth in our solar system, viruses certainly accompany our spacecraft inadvertently. We do our best to sterilize, but some viruses can be surprisingly resistant. If any Earth life ends up establishing on Mars unintentionally, it might well be a virus hitchhiker that finds a way into a hardy microbe, altering it in new conditions. Viruses challenge our definitions. Are they alive or just complex chemicals? They can crystallize like salt and remain inert for years, then revive inside a host. We have revived viruses from 30,000-year-old permafrost, showing they can survive deep time in suspended animation. They are at once intimately tied to life, needing cells to replicate, and yet not living themselves in a strict sense. They've been called organisms at the edge of life, or mobile genetic elements. Perhaps they are best seen as an inseparable part of the web of life. The threads that weave between organisms, stitching their fates together through infection and gene transfer. They ensure that no species is an island. Genetic information flows, sometimes catastrophically, across boundaries. The idea of dominance or rulership almost fails when applied to viruses because they have no agency or intention. They are more like a force of nature. They rule the way the weather or tectonic forces rule, as phenomena we must account for, powerful yet indifferent. But in terms of enduring impact, viruses rank highly. They have witnessed the entire history of cellular life. Indeed, there's speculation that viruses might predate modern cells or co-evolved with the first cells in the primordial RNA world. They will likely persist as long as life does, morphing and moving between hosts. Even if humanity disappeared tomorrow, viruses affecting other species would continue their dance, possibly diversifying further in the void we leave. So, viruses as hidden rulers, they edit the genome narrative of life, trimming here, adding there, keeping everything in flux. They sometimes write themselves into the code of the host, essentially becoming part of the host's genetic legacy. They set off pandemics that can redirect evolutionary trajectories by culling populations. Some theorize that diseases have influenced human genetic distributions, like how the Black Death may have selected for certain immune-related gene variants in Europe. They also humble us, reminding our technologically proud species that nature's tiniest agents can undo our best-laid plans. From viruses, we learn that dominance need not have consciousness or complexity. One might say viruses embody pure information, pure replicative instruction, exerting influence without any trappings of a traditional organism. It's a bit like the pen being mightier than the sword. Here, the pen is a snippet of RNA or DNA, and the sword could be a giant organism's immune system that, if circumvented, falls swiftly. In reflecting on viruses, one cannot help but note how connected all life is through them. The COVID pandemic, for example, originated from a spillover from bats to likely an intermediate animal to humans. A stark reminder that our fate is intertwined with the health of ecosystems and other species. As we encroach on wild habitats, we encounter pathogens our immune systems haven't seen. Thus, the integrity of the wild becomes our own protection. In a sense, viruses enforce a kind of hidden law, disrupt the balance, and you will feel the repercussions. They are part of the Earth's feedback loops too. For example, in the ocean, if a particular bacterial strain becomes too dominant, phages specific to it often increase and knock it back down, a dynamic called kill the winner in ecology. It keeps diversity and balance in check. On a planetary scale, viruses might contribute to something analogous to Gaia theory, helping regulate the biosphere by, say, modulating plankton populations, which in turn affect cloud formation via dimethyl sulfide release from algae, etc. It's not teleological, it's emergent self-regulation via countless interactions, viruses included. So, we've now met the cast of Earth's hidden rulers, plants, the oxygenators and climate stabilizers, bacteria, the foundation builders and extreme survivors, fungi, the recyclers and quiet connectors, insects, the little civil engineers and gardeners of ecosystems, and viruses, the unseen genetic editors and occasional tyrants. Each of these domains of life, or quasi-life, highlights a facet of dominance that contrasts with our anthropocentric definition. They dominate by numbers, by biomass, by necessity, by resilience, by duration, by influence on flows of energy or information, not by conscious control or technological prowess. It becomes evident that the human story is but one thread woven into a much richer tapestry. And yet, for all our minor status in biomass or antiquity, we have undeniably large impacts, disproportionate ones, mostly due to our technology and energy use. This positions us in a strange place. We're at once feeble, completely dependent on these other life forms, and dangerous, capable of disrupting Earth's systems at a pace even these sturdy systems struggle to adapt to. What then does it mean for humans to reconsider supremacy? We might conclude it is an illusion born of short-term thinking and limited scope. Our culture tends to glorify what is immediately impressive: tall buildings, fast machines, big brains, and ignores the slow, pervasive, foundational processes that actually run the planet. Perhaps true supremacy belongs to that which enables and sustains, rather than that which exploits and exhausts. In that sense, the rulers of Earth are those that keep life going, the organisms that regenerate resources, maintain balance, and weather the storms of time. In the final section, we will gather these insights into a broader philosophical reframing. We will ponder what dominance means when reframed from power over to power within, from control to necessity. And we will consider the fragility of our supposed control, and how acknowledging the real rulers of Earth and our kinship with them could guide us toward a more secure and meaningful place in the community of life. Chapter 7: Humility. Standing at the summit of our technological progress, humans have often seen themselves as conquerors of nature. We speak of mastering fire, taming rivers, controlling diseases, and even conquering other planets. But this language now rings hollow against the evidence of how our world actually functions. The preceding exploration reveals a hierarchy of dependence rather than one of command. We sit at the top of a food chain that is itself entirely supported by plants and microbes. We enjoy an oxygen-rich atmosphere that we had no hand in creating. We exploit soils that are products of billions of unseen workers. We rely on insect pollinators and microbial gut flora for our daily bread and health. Far from being the foundation or pinnacle of life, we are a specialized strand in an enormous web, unique in some ways, yes, but utterly enmeshed in the tapestry. Dominance, if it means the ability to thrive and shape environments over long scales, clearly lies with the likes of bacteria, plants, insects, and fungi. These life forms integrate into Earth's self-sustaining cycles. They form feedback loops that have kept the planet habitable. In contrast, our human impact has often been disruptive, breaking loops, depleting stocks, unbalancing cycles. In our few hundred years of industrial civilization, we have burned through carbon that took plants millions of years to lock away. We've eroded soils that took microbes and fungi millennia to build. We are extinguishing species, including insects and birds, at a rate reminiscent of mass extinction events, all to feed our needs. This is not what a wise ruler does. It's what an overzealous newcomer does, ignorant of the system's intricacies. In truth, our supposed mastery is skin deep. The illusion of control stems from mistaking a temporary upper hand for inherent superiority. If there is any doubt about how precarious our dominance is, consider how easily nature can withdraw the consent that underlies our survival. Ecological collapse is already knocking at the door. Pollinator declines threaten agriculture in many regions. Soil degradation could imperil food production for billions. Deforestation and climate change, risk unraveling the very climate stability of the Holocene epoch in which civilization arose. We have enjoyed a relatively benign and stable environment by geological standards, a narrow window of mild climate and rich biodiversity. And in that window, we proliferated. But that stability is maintained by natural processes, ocean and forest carbon uptake, regular rainfall patterns regulated by ecosystems, etc. By perturbing those, we risk pulling the rug out from under ourselves. The ongoing climate crisis is a potent example. We changed the composition of the atmosphere by burning fossil biomass and cutting forests. And now the climate responds with intensifying heat, unpredictable weather, fires, rising seas. Our control over this unraveling situation is limited. We find ourselves scrambling to mitigate and adapt, recognizing that we never truly controlled the climate at all. We only influenced it inadvertently, and now that influence boomerangs back as a threat. The floods, droughts, and storms of a warming world don't distinguish between rich or poor, technologically advanced or not. They remind us that physical laws and ecological feedbacks ultimately hold sway, not human dictates. Likewise, the COVID-19 pandemic peeled away the veneer of human invulnerability. It showed that, in a matter of weeks, a microscopic entity could empty streets, ground airplanes, and upend economies that we thought were unshakable. It wasn't a sci-fi superweapon or alien invasion. It was a natural spillover, arguably a consequence of our disrespect for wild ecosystems, bringing humans into contact with stressed wildlife populations, making viral leaps more likely. This event illustrated a broader truth. Our well-being depends on a healthy biosphere. When we erode biodiversity, we don't just harm other species, we erode the checks and balances that keep pathogens in place and maintain ecosystem services. If we drive insect pollinators to extinction, the illusion that we can maintain agriculture with hand pollination or tech fixes will meet grim reality. Yields will drop, and many foods will become scarce. If we kill the soil with chemicals and lose the microbial and fungal life that give it fertility, our fancy tractors and GM seeds won't save the harvest. The fragility of human supremacy also manifests in our psychological and cultural relationship to control. We have built a culture that often alienates us from nature, viewing it as a resource or backdrop rather than the matrix of our existence. This alienation allows short-term exploitation at the cost of long-term viability. It's akin to a ruler who neglects the very land and citizens that uphold the kingdom. Historically, such hubris heralds downfall. Environmental historians note that many past civilizations collapsed after degrading their environment. The ancient Sumerians salinized their farmlands through irrigation mismanagement. The Maya suffered drought exacerbated by deforestation. Easter Island society imploded after deforesting the entire island. In each case, humans overshot carrying capacity, acting as if their immediate needs trumped the slow regenerative capacity of nature, and nature proved them wrong. Our global civilization now flirts with the same mistake on a planetary scale. Yet, there is hope in reframing our role. If we release the notion of supremacy and instead accept membership in the community of life, we can learn to align our activities with the fundamental forces that truly govern Earth. That means learning from and working with biomass, not against it. For instance, rather than clear-cutting forests and simplifying ecosystems into monocultures, we can practice agroforestry and regenerative agriculture that mimic natural systems, harnessing plant diversity and soil biology to sustain yields and ecosystem health. Instead of seeing microbes as germs to eradicate, we can foster beneficial microbiomes in agriculture and medicine, understanding that a balanced microcommunity keeps the harmful ones in check, like gut microbes crowding out pathogens. In technology, we can emulate nature's efficiency, such as designing materials that biodegrade like organic matter or engineering buildings with self-regulating climate control inspired by termite mounds. These approaches aren't just feel-good eco-ideas, they are pragmatic responses to the realization that we are not above the rules of life. We are better off following the lead of life's time-tested strategies. One powerful mental shift is from thinking of dominance as exploitation to thinking of it as stewardship. True, humans have capacities no other species has, our cumulative culture, science, etc., but what if those are precisely the qualities that enable us to consciously care for the whole? If plants, bacteria, fungi, insects, and viruses created and maintain the biosphere unconsciously, we could use our consciousness not to dominate them, but to ensure our activities do not destabilize the harmony they have built. We might become custodians of diversity and resilience. This concept isn't new. Many indigenous cultures worldwide have long traditions of seeing humans as caretakers or younger siblings to the earth, rather than masters. The Kogi people of Colombia, for example, refer to themselves as the elder brothers and modern industrial society as the younger brother, who needs to calm down and respect the Mother Earth. They consciously refrain from over-exploiting, performing rituals to give back to nature, acknowledging an interdependence. Similarly, numerous First Nations and other indigenous groups personify animals, plants, or natural forces as kin or teachers, cultivating an ethic of respect and balance. These worldviews align with what our scientific understanding now underscores. Humility in the face of nature is wisdom, not weakness. The philosophy of dominance shifts then from being on top of a hierarchy to being at the center of a circle, not the center in an egotistical way, but as part of an interwoven circle of life where each member's well-being depends on the others. We often use the term food chain, but ecologists prefer food web, which is non-linear and interconnected. We, with our consumption and technology, have tugged at that web in unprecedented ways. Now, we are feeling the tremors of it pulling back. To secure our future, we must embrace ecological humility. This doesn't mean belittling humanity. It means right-sizing our self-image. It means acknowledging that our intelligence is unique, but not omnipotent. It must operate within Earth's limits. It also means appreciating the intelligence inherent in other life forms' strategies. The fact that fungi or ants or whales or redwoods have thrived for so long is a testament to solutions different from ours, solutions that emphasize equilibrium, symbiosis, and adaptation. There is awe to be felt in, say, the cooperative hunting of an orcapod, or the towering interconnectedness of a rainforest, or the genome of a tardigrade that can withstand desiccation. Recognizing those as other kinds of genius expands our understanding of intelligence and success beyond the human mold. Ecological humility invites us to replace conquest with reverence and belonging. Imagine if we approached a forest, not as timber to be extracted, but as a cathedral of life where ancient processes far wiser than any economist are at work, storing carbon, filtering water, creating climate, housing biodiversity. We would then log selectively, if at all, ensuring the forest's continuity. Imagine treating a river not as a sewer or simply a water resource, but as the artery of a landscape, alive with connections. We would be loath to poison it, understanding that doing so is an attack on our extended body. This kind of shift is not merely sentimental, it has practical outcomes. Where communities have protected watersheds as sacred or valuable in themselves, they often have reliable clean water and fewer disasters like landslides or floods that occur when upstream forests are lost. Belonging means understanding we are home. The Earth is not a way station for us to use and discard on our way to a sci-fi future in space. It is our ancestral home, and likely the only home that can nurture us for a very long time. Space habitats and terraforming remain far-fetched and would, ironically, require us to recreate Earth-like conditions, which we already have here. Even if one day we venture to Mars or farther, we would carry our biosphere with us, our algae for oxygen, our microbes for digestion, our plants for food. There is no escaping our dependence on life's network. So why not cherish and strengthen that network here and now? In a way, recognizing the illusion of control sets us free. Free from the impossible burden of trying to manage the whole planet with top-down policies and technologies that often cause new problems. Instead, we can aim to align with nature's self-regulating capacities. For example, rather than geoengineering schemes to tinker with the climate with unknown side effects, a humble approach is to restore forests, peatlands, and wetlands that naturally sequester carbon and modulate climate and water. Instead of dosing everything with synthetic chemicals, we encourage beneficial insects and birds to control pests and diverse crop rotations to discourage disease. Instead of genetic monocultures that are high yield but brittle, we maintain seed diversity so that crops can adapt to changing conditions as they have done for millennia under farmer selection. These approaches work with the grain of life's patterns, not against it. We have seen that the hidden rulers of Earth are those that create conditions for others to thrive. This gives us a clue for a new human aspiration, to be not rulers, but gardeners of this planet. A good gardener does not force a plant to grow. They provide the right soil, water, and care, and the plant grows of its own vitality. If we nurture ecosystems, life will continue its grand symphony, and we will benefit as part of it. In the end, our own longevity as a species might depend less on how aggressively we assert dominance, and more on how gracefully we fit into Earth's ensemble. Slumberyard Presents is a solo hobby project exploring the fascinating intersections of science, history, politics, philosophy, and culture. It's an experimental effort driven by curiosity and a deep interest in what emerging technologies like AI can make possible. Part of the journey is learning how to use these tools to bring complex ideas to life in more accessible and engaging ways. The aim is simple: to share content that informs, challenges, and occasionally inspires. If you enjoy this type of content and want to show support, don't forget to like, leave a comment, and subscribe. Thanks for listening.